Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the latest edition of the Woke Bros. Of course, I'm your co-host, Big Wos, aka Wos and Nando, joined as always by my comrade, man, my brother, my partner for real, like the Wayans, Nando Vila out there on the west side of Los Angeles. Nando, what's up with you, brother?
Doing well, doing well. How you doing?
I'm good. As always, we got Rob Lopez on the ones and threes, keeping the trains running on time. On today's show, we figured since it's the holidays, we wanted to get sentimental and sort of get into how and why it is we got into doing what we do, right? As far as our own political awakenings, how we became the people who became these dirty, rotten scoundrel hippies that bring you this show every single week. Nando has a really fucking cool story. Whatever. I can get into mine. I just think it would be dope to share with you guys. And I would love for you guys to hit us up and talk about your own influences and how you got into it. Because I know, rest in peace, my brother Michael Brooks, when he passed away, so many messages I got were from people who were like, look, man, I fucked with you off the NBA shit. I was like, this guy's entertaining in NBA. I'll listen to his fucking politics show with Mike. And Mike completely radicalized these folks, It's just amazing that it was really touching to get those messages from people, because that's what we were trying to do, and that's what we continue to try to do, is just to wake people up to the things that, that we all care about, right? And so we'll get into that towards the end of the show. But first, Nando, yesterday, man, we're taping this on a Wednesday afternoon. Yesterday was Tuesday afternoon. Your president, Donald J. Trump, got on a press conference, and it's so crazy. You know what it reminded me of, Nando? The Republican primary in 2016.
Yeah.
It was Trump.
That old magic. That old Trump magic.
It was Trump giving you real talk that goes anti every single thing his party stands for. Like he was just cutting it down. Like when he would talk about, how'd your brother keep us safe if 9/11 happened when it happened?
Yeah.
Iraq sucked. We're still in Afghanistan. Blah, blah, blah. Like,
Bush lied and people died.
Yeah.
He said that in a debate to Jeb Bush.
He said that to Jeb Bush's face, right? Because that's a little party. Like, my brother kept us safe after 9/11. It's like this weird thing. It's like, whatever. It's this weird thing.
Yeah, we're not counting 9/11.
Right. It's like you telling a chick, I kept you safe after I raped you. It's like, what?
Yeah. I didn't cheat on you after that first time.
Right. It's like, what are you talking about? Anyway, he goes up there, Nando, and he's like, this bill stinks. Like they filled it up with all kinds of pork for all kinds of interests that have nothing to do with COVID. And I hate it. And if we were really doing something right, we'd be giving the people $2,000. $600 isn't enough. That's a pittance. We need to give the people 2 G's. And online Twitter blew up. It just erupted. Even my normie group chats were like, yo, wow, the president just got up there and gave us some real talk. That's freaking crazy, Nando.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, I think what happened, and it happened to me a little bit, is that I forgot Trump was the president. Like, I just forgot that he was the president, just because he's been like in this MIA, insane, right. MIA, just like focused on like overturning the state legislatures, electors in the state of Pennsylvania, like insanely down this rabbit hole of trying to overturn the election, and like no one's paying attention to him outside of like OANN and like the most insane MAGA people. So I just kind of forgot that he was the president. And as this whole drama was going on between the negotiations for the stimulus bill, which we've been covering pretty regularly on the show, we forgot one small little detail, which is that the president,
right?
The president has to sign the bill. We just forgot about that because he's off doing whatever the fuck he's doing, and he just came out and reminded his like, you guys, you haven't gotten rid of me yet. Haven't gotten rid of me yet. Still gotta sign this bitch, and I don't want to sign it. After like, months of negotiations and all that stuff. And like, listen, let's be clear. The bill that was agreed upon and the bill that passed the House, which was going to pass the Senate and was going to go to Trump's desk, is dog shit. Like,
Yeah.
it's dog shit. It is,
Fact.
I suppose you could eat, like, if you're starving to death, you could eat some dog shit and it might help you survive like a little bit
Right.
longer, than
Right.
you would if you were just dying of thirst and hunger in the middle of the desert. But it's dog shit. Like, it is the bare minimum to keep this country afloat before the vaccine really kind of gets distributed widely and we kind of get past this shit. It's another just grotesque handout to the wealthy, like, just, pittance for everyone. It's $600, which is, we were laughing at the $1,200 and how little that felt in back in the summer, and
They
now
came back
they're
with
cutting that in
half.
half. Cutting that in half.
As
The
things are
unemployment
worse than
insurance.
they were. Things are
Oh
not
yeah,
better than they were. Things are
no.
worse.
People have been suffering through this pandemic. I mean, 50 million Americans are experiencing hunger. I mean, it's crazy. And so, and then the unemployment insurance, which was the thing in the first bill that really kept a lot of people afloat, the expanded $600 a week in unemployment insurance, that was also cut in half to $300. And they had to do something because that unemployment insurance, just in general unemployment insurance, is expiring at the end of the year. It's expiring in 3 days or something like that. And they have to do the reason why it passed now and not earlier is because they had to attach it to what they call an omnibus spending bill, which is basically the bill which funds the government for the next year, right? So they use that excuse to attach the coronavirus relief package to that because they have to pass that bill in some way, shape, or form, which is why it came down to the wire and why all this shit got added. Like, I mean, there was a provision in there that gave you a tax break if you had a fucking racehorse. Of course, Mitch McConnell is a senator from Kentucky, where they have all the racehorses. And you get a tax break if you have a fucking racehorse. Like, it's just, there's so many grotesque things about this. And that's like just like a tiny little piece of it.
Right.
I mean, there's $500 million in aid to Israel.
Just cause.
Just cause.
Just cause.
Like, as part of the coronavirus relief package. Yeah, what? So
and then
again,
though, in his press conference, Trump did this surreal thing where he's literally reading it off. And
Yeah.
it is something that jolts you when you hear the numbers, when you hear how expensive some of this stuff is. What got it to 900 million was like not we're pouring 900 billion, into you guys, our citizenry, the people who need this, the people who are suffering. It got to 900 billion just because we're just handing shit out to our friends. It's
oh yeah.
wow.
I mean, so the bill was 5,000 pages long. I mean, AOC was tweeting about this yesterday. There was a picture of the bill. It's like, I mean, it's like the size of, I don't know, 5 dictionaries stacked on top of each other. And so, like, no one had a chance to read it before they were forced to vote on it. And like the New York Times kind of dug into it, and this is their this is their opening 2 paragraphs, okay, just in their analysis of the bill. This is the New York Times. This is not some far left thing. This is like unbelievably mainstream. It writes, tucked away in the 5,593 page spending bill that Congress rushed through on Monday night is a provision that some tax experts call a $200 billion giveaway to the rich. It involves the tens of thousands of businesses that received loans from the federal government this spring with the promise that the loans would be forgiven tax-free if they agreed to keep employees on the payroll through the coronavirus pandemic. But basically, it's this like PPP provision of which they say 1% of the businesses that got PPP got a quarter of the PPP, meaning like it's the most powerful businesses that were able to like maneuver the system, kind of just got this giant giveaway to them, and so that's just, it just shows just how shit works in Washington. It's like the rich have to be made whole, and then whatever crumbs are left over go to you and I. And this bill is like a particularly grotesque version of it, but Trump has just thrown all that into disarray because by threatening to veto it, he's opening the door. Like, he basically handed the Democrats a giant gift.
Yes.
Like a giant gift. If the Democrats play this right, this is like an enormous gift, right? Because the only reason why McConnell passed anything at all was to try to save the careers of Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue in Georgia. He knew that he needed to pass something so that they could survive this January 5th election, and he can keep control of the Senate. But he wanted to keep it as low as possible, as little as possible, just the bare minimum. Now, with Trump threatening a veto, if the Democrats were to pass a new bill in the House that satisfied the $2,000 check and put it on McConnell's desk, knowing that Trump has already supported it publicly, and that John Ossoff, the candidate in Georgia, has supported the $2,000 publicly, he's putting them in a position in which McConnell has to either block it, and he has to get Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue on record saying they oppose the $2,000 checks, or he's got to pass it. Like he's in an impossible position. That's if, this is a big if, the Democrats play this right.
Right. And so I want to talk about a couple of things, Nando. First, immediately, of course, afterwards, Chuck Schumer, who has recanted since, has changed his tune about it, was like, what's Trump doing? Well, why don't we just pass the thing we just negotiated and then we'll come back to the 2000?
Yeah.
Idiot. No, idiot. What are you talking? Why would you say that? Okay, cool. Then, of course, I see Amy Klobuchar on your liberal and MSNBC with Rachel Maddow talking about, I mean, he's just throwing a temper tantrum. We negotiated this thing and blah, 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 blah. We talked about it in our little Woke Bros chat. And I'm like, Nando, like, what are we doing? What's happening? Why are these idiot centrist Dems doing this? And Nando, could you explain to the people why it is these idiot Dems wouldn't do the Pelosi thing, which is just like, fuck, I didn't fucking negotiate that damn deal. I'm for the 2000 immediately. And why those idiots were so slow to understand what was actually happening to them.
Yeah, because it was interesting. You would think like they're all on the same team and they would all be unified in their messaging. Pelosi came out immediately, like was like, yeah, $2,000, let's do it. Whereas the Senate Democrats were not. And that's because there's a big difference between the Senate and the House. We kind of vaguely think of it as the same shit, right. They're just kind of out there in Washington and, but the Senate is very different from the House. The Senate is a very strange institution.
It's a club.
In the Senate, it's a club. They feel like they're part of a club. Like they feel more in common with each other than they do with members of their own party that are in the House. Yep. That's why you see things like Dianne Feinstein hugging Lindsey Graham at the Judiciary Committee. They're like friends. That's why they all like talk about like John McCain as if he were a saint in heaven.
He was St. Francis of Assisi.
Yeah, exactly. And they see those House people as like rabble rousers. Yeah. Even though the House is more reflective of
the people,
of the people, by its very composition. The Senate is just this, like they all hang out like in the Senate cloakroom and like
smoking cigars and drinking whiskey.
Yeah. Exactly. They see themselves as part of the club, and they were like, no. This is the deal we negotiated. Yeah. This is the deal.
The club came up with a deal. Me and my homies, we ironed this out together. We did kumbaya together and got a deal. What's wrong with you people?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, and Joe Biden, remember, Joe Biden was a senator since the 1970s, since the early 1970s. He was a senator since he's like his early 30s. He's been a senator his whole life, pretty much. So he very much believes in all that stuff, which is why Joe Biden intervened to get this bill accepted by the Senate Democrats. Which is interesting also. The other interesting wrinkle about this whole deal is that Kamala Harris, who also is still technically in the Senate, Kamala Harris wrote a bill with Bernie Sanders and Ed Markey a few months ago before she was vice president, or vice presidential nominee. Or no, before she was I don't remember if it was before she was vice president or vice presidential nominee, calling for $2,000 checks a month to everyone.
Right.
She is now the vice president-elect and is still in the Senate. And Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have said nothing about the coronavirus relief package. Nothing. Like some vague things here and there. Like, yes, we need something. But they haven't like weighed in heavily on any of this shit. Which is just, again, it just shows just how reluctant Democratic leadership is to do the bold things that are necessary to save this country, quite frankly. You know,
It's sad, but you're right. And also, Nando, what I wanted to bring to your attention, because driving home just now, my lady asked me. She said, "Why would anybody be against $2,000 checks for people during this fucking? Why would they be against the pandemic?" And I'm like, well, my only guess, honestly, is they don't want people to think that this is routine, that this is normal. They don't want to be held to this standard ever.
Oh yeah,
because you do that, then people say, "Hold on, the government can like do
just
shit for
money.
me."
Just give you money.
Like they don't want people. They have conditioned people to think that you're a piece of shit to take a government handout, that you're lazy, that you're a bum, that you don't like to work, that you're shiftless, that only those people do welfare. And you ask yourself, well, obviously I can understand why the Republicans are doing it, but why the Democrats? Again, they're beholden to the exact same corporate interests who are like, look, if those people start wanting to get their share of the pie, how are we going to take everything? How are we going to keep everything for ourselves? It's obvious why Dems aren't behind it. It's just obvious.
You're exactly right that it's a disciplinary function. They need to keep people conditioned. They need people that are willing to go break their backs at an Amazon fulfillment center. You know, they need people to like demean themselves and, you know, drive for, I don't know, Lyft and Postmates and all these things, you know, like they need people that are willing to do these kind of bullshit, awful jobs, because that's how the system runs. If they sort of raise people's expectations, then the whole thing kind of changes dramatically, and they don't want that, you know?
Right.
So if they start to realize that the government can actually provide relief for people and that people can exercise their democratic rights to redistribute wealth to themselves rather than just redistributing it upwards to the rich, that's a very powerful example that they don't want to give to people. I mean, Trump and the Republicans did better than expected in the election. Why? Because they put money in people's pockets. Like at the end of the day, if this bill were to pass, the $600 relief package, most people will just remember that Trump gave me $1,200 and Biden gave me $600. Yeah, and that's it. Like Trump and the Republicans did better than expected because they provided people with welfare in some degree in the CARES package. I mean, it was gross and awful the way that bill was structured. It was trillions of dollars to the rich, but it did put money in people's pockets. And as much as like $30,000 for some people because of the unemployment insurance. So yeah, I mean, that's why he did better than expected. It's why he did better with like immigrant communities everywhere in America. It's why he did better with Latinos in South Texas. I mean, it was all that. I mean, at the end of the day, money talks, and all the cultural issues we fight about every single day matter way less than that.
And to the extent that they do matter, they matter in the absence of that, right? Like when when that's not on the table in any significant way,
we got to fight about something else. Yeah,
exactly. That's what we'll end up doing. And so, you know, that's again when at the top of the show, Nando talks about a horse owner subsidy. That's literally money that belonged to the government that they just said now belongs to those horse owners. That's what's happening. It's a welfare check, period. That's what it is. It's money that they would have otherwise had to give to the government, put in the tax coffers, that the government said, nah, I'm going to give it back to you. Yeah. That's what happened. That's what happened. Nobody would sit around and call those people lazy, shiftless and all of this kind of stuff. It never happens. These people take the wealthiest people take government giveaways. They take money from the government all the time.
All the time.
All the time. It's like
amounts of money that would shock most people.
That would shock people. And again, the only person that was framing it that way was your friend Bernie Sanders. Yeah. And that's not by accident. The Dems are not your friends, guys. They are not your friends. There's a reason why one thing gets framed as, welfare and what's the other word they like to use? Entitlements. Yeah. One thing gets framed that way, and the other that gets nice words like, oh, it's a subsidy, it's a tax break, it's
Yeah.
welfare, you motherfucker. And so, man, we're taping this on a Wednesday afternoon. This thing is still being negotiated again. Donald Trump, and we can't really know what his motivations are. I've heard like it's like when I come back in 2024, the people are gonna love me, you know.
So, like right as we started taping, Trump vetoed something called the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, which is the bill that funds the military. So Congress had gone home for Christmas, Christmas vacation. Now they're being forced to come back because Trump vetoed the military spending bill for next year, and they have to come back and override the veto.
They have to do that.
They're going to do that.
That's number one. That's your number one job.
Oh yeah, they will leave their half-eaten pancakes on Christmas morning to fly back to Washington to override the veto on the military spending bill. But the fact is, they have to come back. So this gives the Democrats an opportunity to pass a new bill with the $2,000 check and put it on McConnell's desk and see what he does with it. I mean, it just seems such an obvious political move. Don't bet on the Dems to do it. There's been there's definitely momentum behind it. You see Cory Booker has come out in favor of it. John Ossoff has come in favor of it. Obviously, Bernie Sanders, has come out in favor of it. There is some momentum to it. But the way the House and the Senate are structured, it all matters. The leadership is what really matters. And so we'll see what Pelosi does. But yeah, I mean, it was crazy. Nobody expected it.
This is the Trump
at the 11th hour. Yeah.
The December surprise. That dude he is the gift that keeps on giving. And so, man, guys, just keep your eye on that during the holiday, I guess. I don't even know what else to say. Moving on, and I love to give credit where credit's due, and Nando is the one that brought this to my attention as an idea. We did want to talk about just sort of our own political journeys and awakenings, and how did we find ourselves becoming, these dirty centrist cats. I mean, excuse me, dirty.
What? Excuse me, don't insult me like
cats.
that. I may be dirty, but I ain't no centrist.
I ain't no centrist. And so and I've told the story a couple of times, but I think it bears repeating, right? I definitely didn't start following politics in any like even tangential way until Barack Obama, right? Like his candidacy, his campaign definitely lit my imagination on fire. Just the idea that this black dude could seemingly come out of nowhere. Yeah. And not that he can't, because, we learned that he didn't come out of nowhere. Like, we learned that he curried favor amongst the elite class for years, like, to get his little donor base right. He made the right connections with his Harvard people and all of that. He knew what he was doing. Like, he was fucking genius at that. Let's not get that twisted. But it seemed like he came out of nowhere. Like, he wasn't Colin Powell, who we all had heard of. You know what I'm saying? Like, as a political figure. And for him to, to take the presidency as an underdog, specifically against Hillary Clinton and that machine within the party, it was like, wow. Like, and the campaign was about something. It was about change and hope and, all this other shit. And it was like, wow, politics can be powerful. And I sort of became addicted after that, right? And not addicted. I shouldn't say that. I just was like, wow, I'm really following this. And then, so I want to fast forward. I got this job at a bank. And I want to say 2011. In 2011. And, I had this desk job where I'm just literally fucking at a desk all day, every day reading a computer. And this is also around the same time that Bill Simmons dropped Grantland. And anybody who knows this remembers Grantland. What they were known for were these fucking long-ass articles.
Yeah.
Like, they were just known for long form shit, which I liked at my job because it passed the time. Like, I would be on Grantland every single day hoping they had some shit that I could pass the time with. And one of the people who I became a huge fan of was Charlie Pierce.
Yeah.
Because he's just an incredible writer. Like, not even his takes, just like, he's just poetic. Like, this dude is a poet, right? And I became a fan of his. And then I realized that he had this other job that he's had at Esquire. as basically their political correspondent. So he was double dipping. He was doing sports with Grantland and politics with Esquire. And so I started reading this political shit. And he's a Massachusetts guy. He's a fucking he's a Wisconsin guy because he went to Marquette. And a lot of people don't know Wisconsin is like historically known for a lot of progressivism. Like the Lafayette dude, like he started a whole bunch of shit. Like it used to be this like progressive hotbed. It's not anymore. Like it's Scott Walker and the Kochs and all of that. But like Wisconsin is known for a lot of that shit, especially within academia. And like Charles Pierce definitely put me on to mad people, right? Like I remember the first time I read Ed Kilgore, or the first time I read David Dayen, or the first time, like he would always link to all of these people that were also blogging about politics. And so, I just started getting my awareness up about certain things more and more and more and more and more. And then Charles Pierce wrote a blog post about this little show called Up with Chris Hayes. Nando, you're going to love this shit. So
on Saturday mornings.
On Saturday morning. And Charles Pierce is like, you know what I fucking love this show? It's not like the goddamn Sunday shows where they have these DC hacks all the time. Chris Hayes got community activists up there. It's not academic. He got like people who work in the actual communities, union leaders. Like this shit is revolutionary on MSNBC. It's this little show on Saturday mornings. You should watch it. So I then become a fan of Up with Chris Hayes, and I'm watching Hayes all the time. And one day I see a guy named Sam Cedar on there.
Ooh.
And Sam Cedar, of course, on MSNBC's airwaves is like a flamethrower.
Radical.
He's a psychopath, right? And I'm like, shit, I gotta start fucking with Sam Cedar. And I start watching the Majority Report. And I start, paying attention to what Sam Cedar is doing on them. And then I start watching Sam Cedar, and he has like his co-host, and he has the producer, whatever. But his co-host, a guy named Michael Brooks, he doesn't really talk much. Like he adds in his little jokes, he does his little things, but it's Sam's show, right? Like he's
like Paul Schaefer for Letterman,
right? Exactly. But every Monday, Sam would let Michael do his own. That was basically Sam's days off, and that was called Michael Mondays. And so I'm not gonna lie, Nando. At first, I'm like, I'm not gonna watch Sam's sidekick run the show. I'm not watching this shit. And I ignored Michael Mondays. Then finally, I watched the Michael Monday. And I was like, yo, this motherfucker's incredible. He's a fucking, he's a riot. He's great. And I was always start watching Michael Mondays with Michael Brooks. And one day, as I tell the story all the time, he made his Barack Obama as a Nation of Islam radical. He did that little bit, which I thought was genius. I reached out to him. He was like, yo, what's up? I actually live in Brooklyn, blah, 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 blah. We got lunch and all of that. And we became friends, and our friendship just did nothing but grow from there. Which is to say that like as all of these things are happening, I'm becoming less and less, I just fuck with the Dems like my parents and my whole family does. Then
and
my
Chris
family
Hayes
members.
does. And
right. Then
Charlie Pierce does. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Progressively becoming like, man, and you know what I will say about Charles Pierce? From the beginning, he was very skeptical of Barry's pie in the sky, no red America, blue America. He's like, that shit don't make no damn sense. That's not how this works. The Republicans gonna clean his clock, all of that shit, whatever. Anyway, but yeah, progressively, I'm becoming more and more radicalized because I'm just like, as I start consuming the stuff that isn't what you get on New York Times, it starts resonating with me more and more and more and more to now where I get to the point where I'm at now, right? Like where I'm just, when my normie friends are talking, I feel like they're watching a different politics than me. Yeah. You understand what I'm saying? So that's basically how I got here. And of course, as y'all know, I met Nando through Mike, right? And now me and Nando have become friends, and we're growing our relationship in a beautiful way. And I just wanted to share that with y'all. Like, I'm so happy people listen to what we do and get something out of it. Because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to change some minds, one person at a time. We're trying to indoctrinate some people, one person at a time, Nando.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's that's definitely part of our mission, right? And we try to be accessible, we try to be fun, we don't try to be preachy in any way, and we don't try to be like judgmental, if you have like the bad takes or whatever. Um, no, we try to be welcoming. We're welcoming people on this show. And if you're kind of left curious but think it's a little bit scary to understand the ins and outs, like we're here to help. um I my political trajectory started a little earlier. I've called, like, I've been on the left, quote unquote, basically since my early years in college. I was already kind of uh by like 2006, 2007, I was pretty disillusioned with the Democratic Party, especially the wake of the Kerry campaign. I voted
Mm.
for Kerry and was kind of very aware of what was going on, but I was just, I was like, how could they let Bush, just such an obvious criminal and such an obvious dumbass at the same time, uh beat them? Like, what's what you know and I remember, like, when I was in high school, I was always kind of very interested in world affairs. My parents are from Spain, and I would travel to Europe a lot when I was a kid, to visit family and things like that. And so I always had kind of like this worldly air, and that I kind of cultivated because I was a snot-nosed fucking dumbass when I was a young kid. And but it is true that I was kind of like, I was kind of interested in what was going on in the world outside of the United States and things like that. And then when the Iraq War happened, I was a senior in high school. I graduated high school in 2004. So 2003, I was junior senior year in high school. I remember that summer of 2003, which, if people don't remember, people too young to remember that time, it was fucking crazy. Like, it was
Mm.
crazy. The 2 years after 9/11 were insane in America. I mean, it was like fully fascist. I mean, in terms of the media, just falling in lockstep with whatever the government said.
Yeah,
Um,
they call people traitors for not being behind the Iraq, like traitors,
yeah.
like you're
Oh, yeah, yeah.
you're plotting against your country for not
Phil
backing
Donahue.
the
Phil
Iraq
Donahue
War.
was a host on MSNBC at the time. Phil Donahue on MSNBC, he was a host, and he started asking questions about the Iraq War. And this, none of this makes a lot of sense. And like, he wasn't like a flamethrower or anything. That
No.
he was fired, and he's never
Phil
come back.
Donahue,
Yeah.
bro.
He was fired from MSNBC and never came back. The Dixie Chicks. Do you remember that whole
course.
controversy?
Of course.
Like, it was just crazy, a crazy, crazy time where everyone from Fox News, obviously, to the New York Times was marching in lockstep with the Bush administration on their march to Iraq. And I was just a kid in high school, and I kind of got more or less wrapped into it. Not like, I wasn't like some fire breathing war rah guy, but I was like, yeah, this is like this is more or less like, yeah, we should do that. Like,
So
Saddam Hussein's a
just
bad guy,
so
and
the listeners can know, I too was in high school in 03. 03, I would have been probably a junior, I guess, because 01, no, the summer of 03 would have been right before my junior year.
yeah,
So
I'm a grade older than you. Yeah,
in
yeah.
between sophomore and junior year. And I will say, especially having been in New York, lived in New York when 9/11 happened,
Right.
and had the shit scared out of you.
Right.
The idea that we would try to bust some skulls behind it,
Yeah,
that wasn't even a
like, yeah.
question. That wasn't even like
someone
nobody
had
was
to pay.
questioning that.
Someone
I
had to
remember
pay.
my crazy Uncle Gene, who was always a politics dork, and I'd be like, I mean, he'd be like, because my nickname, my family members call me Whoa, and he's like, Whoa, you think we should go to Afghanistan? I'm like, we got to get Bin Laden, right? And he goes to me. And for years afterwards, he would make fun of me and say, we got to get Bin Laden, right? He would make fun of me for, I think, 5 years afterwards. Like, this fucking idiot drinking the Kool-Aid. Anyway, continue, Nando.
Yeah. I mean, remember, it's always worth remembering, Barbara Lee, the only congressperson to vote against the Afghanistan war. The only person.
That's insane.
To vote against it.
Could you
crazy.
think, like,
3 days after 9/11?
Could you think about one thing that we could not get more people to vote against these. They're like, what could actually be on the ballot? I just saw somewhere that they like just ended slavery in Utah. You know what I'm saying? Like, which shows you that there were people who were like, nah, I don't think so. That would have like not unanimously done it. Like, that's insane, dude. That's insane.
So yeah, I mean, so I was like more or less kind of going along with the whole thing, just because like the media climate at the time was crazy, and the political climate and everything, the social climate, everyone was like, yeah, I mean, look, they took down the towers and now they got to pay. And, you know, even though Iraq had nothing to do with it, literally nothing to do with it, like it's just completely, you know, just completely
like even the types of Muslims who did 9/11, like they don't have anything. If anything, they'd be antagonists. They'd be antagonistic. Yeah. Like these people have been beefing for years.
Yeah. So I remember I went to Spain that summer of 2003, as I did basically every summer. And, you know, I was like 17 years old, and it was like that kind of age where people started talking about politics a lot more. And in Spain, the Iraq war was very controversial because the Spanish prime minister was one of the few European heads of state to really go in lockstep with Bush on the war. It was Bush, Blair, and Aznar, who was the head of the Spanish government at the time. And so it was very controversial in Spain. I mean, Spain was incredibly divided on it, and young people were all against it. And so I remember going there, and like all my Spanish friends were like, oh, you know, Bush, you fucking, you know, criminal, and like the Iraq. And I was like, I had like almost like a natural reaction to be whoa, like, shut up.
America's like, great.
Yeah, what are you talking about? Like, you guys are just jealous. And, but then, you know, the more I stayed there that summer, you started seeing news reports coming from Iraq, and the Spanish media, the Spanish television, just like this television pretty much everywhere in the world outside of the United States, doesn't censor violence in the news. In the United States, you cannot show on a newscast in, you know, CBS Evening News dead bodies on the street. You can't even show casket. You couldn't even show, at the time, there was like a whole political thing that you couldn't even show the caskets.
Show American bodies coming back.
Yeah. You couldn't even show the caskets of the bodies coming back. So the war was just kind of like a fake video game or something. Mm-hmm. Like, you didn't see the violent effects of it, which were like unbelievably grim, if you cared to look. And you know, we've seen subsequently a lot of the images that have come out and things like that are horrifying. And I remember being just like watching a Spanish newscast, which is like a regular newscast. It wasn't even like a breaking news. It was just like the regular kind of newscast. There's some reporter out in Iraq covering the war, and it's like you start to see like horrific violence. You start to see like, you know, a child's hand kind of severed laying there in the middle of the street, or you know, just dead bodies everywhere. And the violence of the war and the sort of difference in the media culture that I saw was so jarring that it put the seed in my mind that something was deeply, deeply wrong with this whole thing. And then when I got to college, I studied history, and I remember I had a professor who was just like a, you know, basic like liberal, not particularly radical.
Where did you go to college? That people want to know.
Boston College. I'm a
BC.
Boston College Eagle, BC.
Wow.
Baby. Yeah. I went to college with Matt Ryan. Yeah.
Oh,
same
okay,
class as Matt Ryan.
Got you. Matty Ice days. Okay,
Matty Ice, baby. Yeah. And Jared Dudley, you know, NBA fans.
Of course.
Yeah. And you know, I had, you know, Boston College is not a radical school at all. It's a pretty conservative school, actually. It's a Jesuit school. You know, they didn't allow gay clubs, for example, when we were there. And so we had this professor who was just kind of a standard lib, and we took he taught American foreign policy, and I just learned about American foreign policy, and I was just like, wait, we killed 3 million people in Vietnam? Like, we always hear about the 57,000 Americans that died in the Vietnam War because there's a Vietnam War memorial. We killed 3 million people? What? You know, like, what? For what? No reason. The fucking Vietnam, like a country that has nothing to do with anything, it just
communism
for no reason. Yeah, for no reason. I'm like, what? And you know, that's when I started kind of reading a lot more dissenting voices, and then obviously I started reading Noam Chomsky, which I recommend everyone to read, or watch his, watch him on YouTube or watch his documentary. There's a documentary that was on Netflix. I don't know if it's still on Netflix. It might still be on Netflix, but it's definitely on YouTube, called A Requiem for an American Dream, but hosted by Noam Chomsky. Highly recommend it. Highly recommend Manufacturing Consent, which is a book and a documentary. Anyway, when you read Chomsky, you realize that, like, oh my God, all of the stuff that we were indoctrinated with is just
bullshit.
All a lie. Bullshit. Like, it's just straight up propaganda and bullshit. And so, yeah, that was when I started kind of becoming more of like what I would call like a leftist. I started getting interested in the history of socialism. And once you've shed the sort of propaganda
about capitalism, about how
America,
you can't have freedom without capitalism. Like,
exactly.
Like they tie everything that America is, this idea of freedom, individual freedom and democracy and all of that. We only have it but for the free market.
Yeah, to the profit motive. Yeah.
We could
funny
not
how that works.
have those
funny
things.
How that works. Yeah. Funny how that works.
It's the most genius marketing plan that ever was devised. It was like, we cannot have those things without the profit motive.
No. And you're right that it was a explicit marketing plan. I mean, everyone should look up Adam Curtis's documentaries. A lot of them are on YouTube. If not, seek them out on wherever you can. Adam Curtis, he's done a documentary called Hypernormalization, which kind of explains pretty much everything about the current moment. He did a documentary called Bitter Lake, which explains the U.S. relationship to Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan over the years, which is fucking fascinating. And then he did a documentary about a guy named Eddie Bernays, who was Sigmund Freud's nephew or something like that. And he was the guy who basically created that propaganda plan that you're talking about, using psychoanalysis to basically sell capitalism to the American people. It's a fascinating documentary. Anyway, that's when I started reading all about that stuff. And then when Obama came along, I was living in China. I moved to China after I graduated college. And when Obama came along, I was like, wait a minute, this seems like
this is different.
This feels like
this is not Kerry.
This is not John Kerry. This is not fucking Hillary Clinton. This is something else. I mean, he's running on closing Guantanamo Bay and some of these horrific crimes that he spoke very eloquently about all that stuff. And then he got in there, and within 0.05 seconds, and when he started appointing all the bank executives to run his economic team, I was like, okay, all of them were right. All of those like left critics who I was like kind of wary of, like, come on, it's Obama. Like, what are you? Like, they were all
right.
100% right. Yeah, like, the corporations, man, they control the government, man. And it's like, yeah, I mean, how can you deny it? Yeah.
And that's where we get to today, right? And Barry looms large on this podcast because, and I think when we had that conversation on our newest segment, maybe Obama's kind of a douche, on our newest segment. And when I think the most important thing you said, Nando, is that Barry is thoughtful. Barry is smart. Barry does
he's better than
think
these
about
people.
He isn't this at the hip type of guy. Like, he is a deep thinker. Like, he should know better. Like, Barry of all, we would expect the most from him. Somebody as eloquent as him.
Barry grew up in Indonesia shortly after a U.S. sponsored genocide that killed 1 million people. He's written about this.
Right.
In Dreams of My Father, they lived in Indonesia shortly after this. Right. He really should know better. He really should know better. I mean, there's a book called The Jakarta Method, which I read this year by Vincent Bevins, which talks about the Indonesian genocide, which the United States was actively involved in. 1 million people wiped off the face of the earth, Yeah. So, yeah. And,
while we're recommending books related to my own radicalism too, I read, I think his name is Timothy Weiner, or I forget his name, but he wrote this book called Legacy of Ashes. And it's about the history of the CIA.
Ooh.
And the book is based on the official records. like 30 years after they fuck up a
Yeah,
mission
they
in Cambodia,
declassify stuff. Yeah,
they
yeah.
declassify it. And so the book is just about the shit they let us know publicly. And that's basically what Legacy of Ashes is about. And what it systematically shows you throughout the course of the book is that the CIA is trash, has been trash, and will always be trash. They have been terrible at their stated job from the inception. From the start, they stunk up the joint. They get a lot of money and funding. And so with money, you can do anything, right? Like you can wield influence in third world countries and you can start coups and you can do that because you have money. But like just as tactics and like this idea, like, when you watch Jason Bourne, that's how I know it's propaganda. That's why like I have trouble with conspiracy theorists now because I'm like, bro, I think it's the opposite. I think if the CIA were actually Jason Bourne, they wouldn't have to put it in a movie. Like, that's just propagandizing us to think that these guys are these hyper-competent superhumans. No. They are bumbling idiots, and if they didn't have the might of the American government, military, and money behind them, they would have been fired a long time ago, right? Like, Kennedy after the Bay of Pigs, like, the Bay of Pigs that's CIA.
That's the most insane thing that's like ever happened. Yeah.
Right. It's like a half-baked plot. It's like we got some money, we could pay some people to do it. We just praying that it's gonna work. It serves the need of a perceived agenda that we think the power wants. So they're like suckling at the power teeth, like, no, we're gonna get it done for you. And they fail time after time after time. And then when you really learn about why we went to Vietnam, when it's just like, what? Like, they think communism is going to spread in Asia, and then from Asia is just going to jump over the seas and get America. It's like, what? Containment? What? These are our geniuses. And so, it's along the way you read all of these things and you learn all of these things like, wow. 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 And that's how we can get to the place that we are today, right? Like, I don't see politicians as like all these evil people or whatever, but they're self-interested. And if we don't change the equation on what their self-interests are, which is they can take money from the money class, keep themselves elected, and keep themselves getting elected, by feeding people kente cloth meals. Nothing's gonna change. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's the point of this podcast, man. I think we want to, man. I think one day we should do an episode where we round up some of the great works of leftist propaganda and try to share it with the people, man. Because this is definitely important. And now I remember I used to, when my girl at dinner parties would like she would joke, not even jokingly, but like just to shock people and to make fun of me. She'd be like, my boyfriend's a communist. And I'd be like, first of all, please stop doing that. But now I'm just like, well, actually I'm socialist. Like communism is like something a little bit different, but whatever, And so, this is how you get this way, by just learning about stuff, staying clear-eyed and wanting to stay in the fight, That's our show, man. I want to say a happy holidays to everybody, man, who supports Count the Dings, who listens to this show week after week. We're constantly getting feedback. I get so many people who say this is their favorite show that they listen to, and that like they're learning things all the time and they're being hip to stuff. And man, that's just what we're trying to do. We're trying to share the information, give you guys a perspective that you're not getting out there from your your mainstream sources. And so thank everybody who supports us. I hope you guys are safe and with your loved ones this holiday, man. Nando, you wanted to get in there?
No, I mean, I echo what you said, that I get more feedback on this show than a lot of the other shows I've been involved with in my life. I've been a host for many years, and this show in particular seems to have struck a nerve with a certain audience, and it seems like we're helping people, and that's always what I've wanted to do. Like, I'm not interested in the super advanced shit or really the bullshit kind of internal debates that happen all the time and in a lot of these kind of left media. That's not what I want to do. I want to get people who are curious, who are interested, who are, you know, just I don't know, like just regular people kind of going through their day, and I want to just give a little bit of help them with a little bit of political education. And so I just want to say, like, everyone that reaches out, like, I reach out as much as you want. Like, I cannot enjoy it more, and I love doing the show, and I love doing with you guys. And you know, it's been a tough 2020. We lost Mike, the guy who put us together, and you know, it's almost like this show is just every week like a small tribute to him, that we can do, to remember him by. And it's just, you know, it makes me very happy.
Same, man. And so we'll see you guys. No, we will not see you guys next week. Sorry. We'll do a Christmas show, but I think you know enough about me and Nando. Ain't no New Year's Eve show going down, y'all. And so anyway, happy holidays to all you guys. Again, reach out to us. Let us know about your political awakenings. We will see you guys in 2021, and hopefully you'll be $2,000 richer by then.
Hell yeah.
And so for Nando Vila, I'm Big Wos, and for Rob Lopez, the producer, we're out of here. Peace.
Out of here.